All right, today we're going to piece together the life of a true Texas frontiersman, a guy named James Monroe Choate. Now, what's really cool is that our source for this isn't some dry history book. It's a really personal account written by his grandnephew, and it gives us this incredible, rare look into a life that really did help shape the American Southwest. So listen to this. Right from the get-go, the author lays it all out. This isn't just a biography he's writing. It's more like a rescue mission for a memory. He's trying to save this story from disappearing forever, told from the heart by one of the very last people who actually knew the man himself. Okay, so who was this guy? Let's dive in. We're going to trace his journey from the hills of Tennessee all the way out to the raw, untamed frontier of Texas, the place where he would end up building his entire legacy. You can see here on the timeline, it's the classic American story, isn't it? That constant push westward, step by step, into new territory. And it all culminates in 1855 in Karnes County, Texas. You gotta remember that place, because that's where his story really kicks off. So he gets to Karnes County, builds a simple log house, and from there, he just starts building. I mean, he wasn't just raising a few cows, he was trafficking in livestock, shipping out hides and tallow. And this humble little start, it's the seed for something that's gonna grow to a scale that's, well, almost impossible to imagine. So Choate's building this pretty prosperous life in Texas. Things are going well. But of course, that prosperity and the entire community is about to be threatened by a massive national crisis, the Civil War. And it's during these years that he really evolves from just a successful rancher to something more. This is where he truly earns that title of Benefactor. You have to put yourself there. The Civil War hits, and all the able-bodied men, they're gone, off to fight. The Texas home front is just wide open. Vulnerable, there's no real army or police force out there to protect people. So what happens? Well, someone has to step up. And that someone was Choate. He didn't wait around for orders. He just started organizing, gathering the old men and the young boys into posses to defend their homes and chase down raiders. And his work went way beyond just local defense, not by a long shot. He became a vital part of the Confederate supply chain. I mean, he was personally driving huge herds of cattle all the way east to New Orleans. But what's really important is that he wasn't just in it for himself. He drove cattle for his neighbors, especially for widows, and he made damn sure they got paid. He was looking out for his people, plain and simple. All right, so the war's over, and Texas has this weird problem. It is just overflowing with cattle, millions of them, but has no market. At the same time, the North is desperate for beef. Well, this created the perfect storm, the perfect conditions for the legendary cattle drives. And this, my friends, is where James Choate becomes an absolute king.
Howdy, my name is James Monroe Choate of Kennedy, Texas.
I don't care which side of the Civil War you fought for, what your complexion is, or if you're running from the law.
As long as you can ride a horse and herd cattle and don't steal from me, you're hired.
To supply 100 men across multiple outfits for months. It was like a massive mobile city. And the scale, just get this. In a single year, 1871, he sent 16 separate herds up the trail. 16. Not 16 cows, 16 full-blown operations, each with its own crew and supplies, moving thousands of cattle hundreds of miles. The management skill alone is just, well, it's staggering. This quote, this tells you everything you need to know about his reputation. In a world with basically no formal banking, a man's word was his bond. And Choate's word, it was as good as gold. That immense trust is what allowed him to run this massive enterprise on credit, all the way from the Rio Grande to the cattle towns up in Kansas. Okay, so we know he was this business titan, this cattle king. But who was the man behind the empire? What was he actually like? Let's zoom in a bit on his life at the H-Cross Ranch and look at some of the more personal details and his quirks. Now, this is maybe the most fascinating thing about him. The guy was completely illiterate, couldn't read or write a single word. And yet, he traveled to big cities like New Orleans and Dodge City to negotiate these massive deals. You gotta love the story about the French restaurant. He can't read the menu, so what does he do? He just says, just fill the bill, tries a sample, and then orders everything. That's not ignorance. That's pure practical intelligence and confidence. And what'd he look like? Well, he wasn't some giant of a man. Actually, pretty small. But you get this vivid picture, right? The long beard, stained yellow from chewing tobacco, eyes so sharp he never needed glasses, and could read a cattle brand from way off. And that famous belly Nutra hat. Practical for chasing cattle through the brush. He was a man literally shaped by his environment. Oh, this story is my favorite. Some lost travelers show up at his ranch and ask if they can buy some bread from him. And he gets angry. His response is just perfect. It completely captures his character, this gruff, profane exterior that's hiding an almost aggressive generosity. He's not going to sell bread to strangers in need. He's going to give them a tub full. And life on his ranch was just full of these wonderful little details. Get this, they had a jackass that was basically the official ranch clock. It would bray exactly at noon every single day. So accurate, the ranch hands could literally set their watches by it. It was one of those small wonders that really fascinated Choate. And then there's this one, and it's just kind of heartbreaking. This tough-as-nails cattleman, he had a pet parrot, and the parrot called him Grandpa. Well, one night, an owl snatched the parrot, and as it was being carried away into the dark, the family could hear it calling out his name. It reveals this much softer, more vulnerable side to this frontier patriarch. And Choate lived by this code, the code of the West, that unspoken rule that you just don't ask about a man's past. He would hire any man who could do the work. He didn't care if you were a fugitive or detective. As long as you did your job, your past was your own business. It was a fresh start, no questions asked. But, all eras come to an end. Nothing lasts forever. So let's take a look at how Choate handled a changing world and reflect on the legacy he left behind as the open range itself began to close. And what changed everything? Technology. The railroads pushed west, and suddenly, those long, dangerous, expensive cattle drives, they were obsolete. It was the end of an era. But Choate was smart. He adapted. As he got older, he shifted his focus. He started raising horses and mules and farming. He basically closed the book on one of the most iconic periods in American history. And this brings us right back around to where we started. The author himself, he's totally honest. He says, look, this is all from my memory, and there are probably inaccuracies. He's not claiming it's a perfect history, it's just an honest recollection. And it's almost like an invitation for others to add their own pieces to the puzzle before the whole story is gone for good. So that really leaves us with a final thought. This man, Choate, was a builder, a leader, a protector, an incredible figure. But without his grandnephew deciding to just sit down and write down what he remembered, how much of that story would have just vanished? It's a powerful reminder of just how fragile history can be and how much it can depend on a single voice telling a story before it's too late.